Hey everybody, it is a special emergency episode of the Visto Show because, well, it finally happened. Immigration Canada dropped its levels plan, and that means we got to dive the heck right in because there is a lot to cover. I think it was expected for noon today, so it came a little bit early, but here we are. The plan is out. So what I wanted to do here is go through the whole plan and basically discuss it, share our thoughts, share our opinions, and see, what do we think of the numbers? Now that they're out, now that they're official, I'm about to get comfy because this might be a bit of a ride. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to share my screen and we're going to jump right into it. So here we go. I'm going to put the link to this in the description as well. So if you're watching live or later on LinkedIn, you'll see the link to this in the comments. And if you are watching this after the fact on YouTube, you'll be able to see it there as well. So let us dive right in here. So we can see here, notice supplementary information for the 2025-2027 immigration levels plan. October 24th, that's today. The levels plan includes permanent resident targets and ranges under, et cetera, et cetera. I'm gonna, like if you want to read every word, I would say go read every word. I'm gonna kind of cut to the meat of things. Also includes for the first time temporary resident targets for international students and temporary foreign workers, constituting a new holistic approach to manage migration. I gotta say, I think it's a good thing. We'll look at the numbers and see what we think of them. But it's almost like hindsight is 2020 in the sense that it's almost crazy that they had PR levels but not TR levels, and I'll be referring to permanent residents in this episode as PR and temporary residents as TR. Temporary residents meaning foreign workers, students, and visitors. So it's kind of a catch-all there. Temporary and permanent residents play a key role in blah, blah, blah. In recent years, Canada welcomed newcomers to support our economy and address labor needs. As we move away from post-pandemic measures, there is a need to better align temporary and permanent residence levels with community capacity. This plan adopts a whole of society approach to be responsive to needs of newcomers and Canadians, including through consultations with blah, 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 blue, blue, blue. Basically, what they're saying is, hey, we let in way too many temporary residents, so now we actually have to make a plan so that they're in line with permanent residents, which, I'll give them credit, I think is at this point the right thing to do. To ensure a well-managed migration system, the government is reducing the share of temporary residents to 5% of the total population by the end of 2026. A series of measures have been announced over the course of the past year, including an intake cap on most study permit applications and an amended cost of living requirement for students, eligibility changes to the PGWP, and to work permits issued to the spouses of international students and foreign workers under the IMP and TFW program. I've gone over these in recent episodes of the Visto Show, so if you do want to kind of dive deeper into those, I highly recommend checking out recent episodes that you can find on YouTube. Additional measures applied to the low-wage stream of TFW program were also recently introduced to better align the program with current labor market conditions, and also changes to the high-wage stream as well. In keeping with these reductions, targets for new temporary resident arrivals are set at 673,000 in 2025, 516,000 in 2026, and 453,000 in 2027. So I'm going to take a look in a second into how big of a drop this is from the last few years, because I don't remember off the top of my head. What I find most interestingly enough, and again, we're going to look at the numbers more in depth in just a second here, is they're going to continue to decline year after year. So number one, I want to compare this to recent years to see how drastic this number is. And then they're dropping it even further in 2026 by about 150,000 until allowing it to slowly creep up in 2027. These figures represent work and study permits issued to new arrivals to Canada. Okay, so I guess this doesn't include visitors. The target in 2025 reflects the previously announced study cap and represents 45% of overall new temporary resident arrivals. In 2020, the international students make up the majority of temporary resident arrivals, respectively, while the remainder of the arrivals will be allocated to temporary workers. So they're going to be giving the majority of TRs to students as opposed to workers. Do I think that's good? No, but let's get into the numbers in a second and see. These targets support the needs of our labor market and Canadian employers, especially in sectors. How does bringing in more students as compared to workers support the needs of our labor market? So I don't agree with this sentence. Doesn't make sense to me. But let's dig into the numbers in a second and see. Targets for temporary and permanent residents have been developed in tandem. It is anticipated that more than 40% of overall PR admissions will be students or workers already in Canada. So this makes sense. And again, it's another reason why they should, and I'm glad they are, setting levels plans for temporary residents and permanent residents in tandem. It makes sense. It's a smart thing to do. And because they hadn't been doing that, I think that's a big reason why we got into the dicey situation that we're in right now. Hopefully it can be fixed soon. This levels plan projects a decrease in overall PR admissions to 395,000 in 2025, a further reduction, to 380,000 in 2026, and a further reduction to 365,000 in 2027. Jeez. So they're really taking the hammer to PRs. Supporting the Canadian economy continues to be a key priority of this levels plan, as the economic category represents the largest proportion of admissions each year, reaching nearly 62% by 2027. A greater share of economic admissions are allocated under the federal economic priorities to skilled workers, with a focus on critical sectors. I think this is a good sign. I actually posted this yesterday on LinkedIn because I think the National Post article said that the majority was not going to go to economic. So I'm glad that that was wrong, because I think the majority absolutely needs to go to economic these days given our economy. But we'll look at the numbers right down here in just a second. An emphasis is also on to put on ensuring that admissions are dedicated to facilitating transition to permanent residence for those who are already in Canada as students and workers under the In Canada focus. I think that's largely a good thing, but let's get into the numbers and we'll kind of see more. Support for family unification continues through the family category, which maintains a rate of 22%. Canada's strong and proud tradition of offering protection to those most in need, to the sustained targets for government-assisted refugees, which contributes to the resettled refugees and protected persons category's rate of 15% of overall PR admissions. 21,000 admissions are provided to commitments made under H&C grounds and or as part of public policies by the Minister of IRCC over 3 years. In line with IRCC's policy on Francophone, the levels plan includes higher proportions of French-speaking permanent residence targets outside of Quebec. So I thought there was a lot going to the French language proficiency draws already. It looks like even bigger proportions of invites are going to go to French language speakers in the future. Does this make sense to me? Absolutely not. But it hasn't made sense to me for a while, other than pandering to, the Quebec or French-speaking voters. But anyways, of overall permanent resident admissions, which provided, I've talked about French-speaking draws in previous episodes, so I won't go into too much details here. Cecile says, I thought we were supposed to have this conversation on November 1st. Yeah, I mean, two things, Cecile. Number one, first, I thought this plan was supposed to drop on November the 1st, like you. I wonder why. Like, did this change because the Liberal government has been under so much heat, especially related to immigration? Did they decide to release this plan early, right? Today is the 24th. The 1st is not till next Friday. So I don't know. I'll be interested to try to see why the plan came out earlier than expected. It was expected on November 1st. Did they just try to get to it a little bit earlier? I don't know. It'll be interesting to kind of see. And then number two, I thought this announcement was going to be made. Then I heard the announcement was going to be made today at 12 p.m. Eastern, but it dropped a few hours early. So anyways, we're way ahead of schedule here for whatever reason. So anyways, with that being said, let's go into the numbers. So first and foremost, you can see the 2025 to 2027 levels plan, and they start off with temporary residents. Now you can see here's overall, right? So 2025, 673,000. Now keep in mind this is a range, right? So I think, as they usually do for PR, yeah, so they set a target with a low range and a high range. So we can see here the target being 673,000, low range at 604, high range at 742. And what they've done here is they've broken it down into workers and students. Workers, they further divide into IMP and temporary foreign worker, right? So you can kind of see this breakdown here. Now, there's two things I want to look at specifically for TR. Number one, how big of a gap is this number from previous years, which we'll look up in just a second. And number two, why is it, this is a huge reduction from 2025 to 2026. They're cutting by about 150,000, and it's all coming from the worker category, right? So you can see here, 305,000 students for next year, 305,000 students for 2026, and 305,000 students for 2027. So students, they're keeping it relatively flat. Well, not relatively, they're keeping it flat. 305,900 students per year. Temporary foreign worker program and the, more specifically, the international mobility program is being gutted next year, right? So you can see not only are they cutting workers to 306, well, I don't know about cutting. We'll look at these numbers in just a second. But from 2025 to 2026, they're more than cutting in half the IMP program from 285,000 to 128,000. Now, more specifically, you can see, so if you want more explanation, you can click on the link and you can click on these numbers, and it shows you in the index what each one really means, right? So IMP is a collection of streams that do not require an LMIA. So for example, treaty work permits or work permits issued under economic, family class, or humanitarian public policies and PGWPs, right? Now, I guess maybe part of the big drop here is we can say, well, there's going to be far fewer PGWPs because number one, there's far fewer students, and number two, they've made huge changes to the PGWP, so there will probably be less of them. So is this big cut mostly going to come from PGWPs, or is it going to come from a combination of other stuff? I don't know. Time will tell. Ahmet says, I was also expecting this on November 1st. By the way, anything about NOC 4 to 5 PR pathway they announced back in August? I'm not sure, Ahmet. Let's take a look. We're going to take a look at the PR numbers in just a second here. We're starting with the temporary residents, and we will get to the PR numbers in just a minute here. Now, so let's take a quick look on the temporary residents admitted to Canada 2023. I don't know if the 2024 numbers are out, right? Now, here's some information. I always want to go to canada.ca first, or if anybody has data on how many workers and students were approved in 2023, that would be really helpful. This is how many temporary residents are in Canada, which is a huge number that we're going to talk about. Study permits, open work permits. I really should have pulled these numbers up ahead of time. If anybody has a link to just strictly the number of temporary residents that were approved in 2023 and 2022 for comparison purposes, then that would be great. Temporary population. Oh, so here's also the backgrounder. Let's see if the backgrounder has previous numbers, and I'll link to this in the comments as well, or below if you're watching on YouTube. Let's see here. Temporary residents. Previously announced. It's mostly the workers I'm interested in, because the students, we've already been over this, right? We kind of knew the cut was coming to students already, and they've been approving like 400,000, 500,000, 600,000 students a year over the last few years. So it's being gutted down to 305,000. So that's not a huge surprise. What I'm looking to find is how many temporary workers were approved in 2023 and 2024 so that I can compare the number to, yeah, they don't have the number here. Maybe I can just look at, let's look at Canadian work permit approvals in 2023. Let's see what comes up. Ba-ba-ba, boo-boo-boo. Backlogs. Geez, I thought this number would be a little bit easier to find. Let's pull up our good pal OpenAI and see what they have to say. How many work permits were approved in Canada in 2023? Okay. That doesn't help. How about 2022? Okay, in Canada, in 2022, Canada approved approximately 610,000 work permits. This number reflects the country's efforts to address blah, blah, blah. Do you have a government source for this? This is turning into a little AI hackathon at the same time. Specific annual report on Parliament to immigration or the okay. You can also check Statistics Canada. Okay. You know what? For the purposes of this show, I'm just going to take them, or let's look this up. Annual 2022. Let's see if it got it right. Is there like a table or something? Oh, here we go. Permanent residents, temporary residents, study permit holders, work permit holders. So this says 415,000. I don't know if this means that they were approved or if there was a total of holders. So I don't know if this means approvals in the year of. I'm not sure if that's a little bit different. Let's see if we can find the specific numbers, or like I said, if anybody has a specific number on how many work permit approvals were granted in those years. This is levels plan, H&C. We want temporary residents here. Anyways, maybe I'll do this. Oh, here, temporary residents. Now, what we want is approvals. International students, okay, here we go. Temporary foreign workers. Okay. But this is just giving me the total. I'd love to know the approvals. Transition to permanent residency. Geez, why is this a much harder... So again, there's some interesting numbers here. My only question is, are these the number of total people who hold these permits in Canada during that year, or the number that were approved that year? I don't know. But let's say in 2021 it was 425,000. That's a pretty big cut, right? Even from 2021, I'm assuming the numbers in 2022 and 2023 are probably higher, right? So anyways, this is this part right here in terms of temporary residents. Now I'm curious to hear from you folks. You know, what are you most surprised about? What are you not as surprised about from some of these TR numbers before we get into more detail? The biggest surprise for me so far with the TR numbers is, number one, how much they're reducing the IMP numbers. And then I need to just look at a little bit more information in terms of how many TFWs have been approved per year over the last few years, so I can compare and see if this is, you know, as big of a cut as I expect. But yeah, I mean, this is a massive one-year cut for IMP, and I'm curious to know, you know, is it mostly going to come from PGWPs? Is it going to come from a mix? But, big cut from 2025 to 2026. Now, let's move on to the PR numbers as well. I want to make sure we can cover that too. So let's continue scrolling down here to the permanent residents. And I'm going to take a quick sip before we jump in. So, permanent residents. Some very interesting stuff as well. Now, this is much easier to compare because we can just look at the levels plan from the prior year, right? Which I conveniently have on hand right here, right? We can't look at the levels plan for TR from last year because there wasn't any. So anyways, we can see here the updated TR levels plan. 2025, targeting 395,000 permanent residents. Compared to last year, 485. In fact, the feds targeted last year, they planned to have 500,000 approved this year. This year, they've revised it and cut over 100,000 from that plan, down to 395,000. So a huge cut. Why are they doing this huge cut? Well, because they've let in too many for too long, I guess, and probably more importantly, because negative sentiment towards immigration has gone up. And as we're seeing, a lot of the current government is flying with the wind. And so if the country says we don't like immigration, then the government says we don't like immigration either, and they start cutting. I think this is a little bit too little too late, but anyways, better late than never, right, as they say. Now we'll see here overall French speaking, 8.5%, 9.5%, 10% of all PR. Do they have one? Oh yeah, they have from the year before, 26,000. So the French-speaking numbers are actually even higher than, oh no, they're not. 29, 31, 31. And here they were 31, 36. I guess the percentages are higher because they're freezing and actually reducing, right? So you can see here, 2025, they're cutting the PR numbers to 395,000, and then each year they're continuing to cut 380, 365. So again, they're just taking the band hammer, or taking the, cutting the legs out of the PR numbers over the next 3 years. And interestingly enough, they're holding the French, so it's going to be a larger proportion of French speakers. Again, why? I don't really know. I've talked about it in previous episodes. I think, again, they're doing it largely for politics and voters. But anyways, not the main topic of this conversation. Cecile says, I think I saw somewhere it says that temporary residents currently in Canada are excluded from the target, which would explain the drop from 2025 to 2026, maybe. Could be. I don't know if they mention that here. I don't know if they explicitly said that. That might explain things. But again, like IMP, and it even outlines it here, IMP includes PGWPs, right? Which are people in Canada, right? You're not getting a PGWP from outside Canada, right? Because you have to have graduated from a Canadian school. Maybe you happen to have then relocated to outside of Canada, but you were at some point and or most likely still inside Canada, right? But yeah, I'll try to dig a little bit more into that, Cecile, because it's an interesting kind of line of thinking, and I'm curious to know if it's true or not. So continuing on with PR here, number one, a huge cut this year, and they continue to cut for the next 2 years as well. Now let's look more specifically at the categories, right? And what I want to do here is I actually want to split these into 2 screens so we can compare them at the same time, right? So what we're looking at here is 2024 on the left and 2025 on the right. And I'll try to keep them kind of as even as possible. So you can see here, overall target 485 slashed to 395. Now let's go down even further. Met says the cut for IMP also means a significant decrease in the number of business immigration work permits, like LMI exempt ICT and spousal open work permits. Yes, exactly, Ahmet. I'm going to touch on the entrepreneurial side in just a second as we get into the economic PR numbers. But the fact that I'm not going to dive into ICT here. You should definitely check out, I think it was the most recent episode or the one before it of the Visto Show, where I talked about why I think the changes to ICT were terrible. So I'm not going to spend more time talking about that here, but I totally agree. Cecile says in here, let me check that link. Oh, in the backgrounder. Okay. Let me pull up the backgrounder. Wait, where was the backgrounder? Yeah, this is it here. No. Where did I put it? Here's the backgrounder. Do you have a specific paragraph, Cecile, just so I don't have to flick through the whole thing? Although it should be pretty easy. Here, I'll go under temporary residents. Starting in Canada, we'll have targets for temporary residents. TR targets will capture the number of new workers and students arriving in Canada. Student arrivals are aligned. Workers' arrivals are those under the IMP and then in the blah, blah, blah. TR targets were calculated by assessing a number of factors. As such, categories excluded from the TR targets but included in the stock of TRs are work or study permit extensions or change of status from within Canada, seasonal workers who enter and leave Canada within the same year. Okay, that makes sense. Asylum claimants. But I'm a little bit confused. Like, does this, like, I still don't think this refers to PGWPs, though, which would explain the drop from 2025 to 2026, maybe. I mean, if anything, Cecile, your point confuses me even more, because if these people are being excluded, then why is the cut so huge? Why are they cutting from 285 to 128 if this still doesn't even include all of the TRs who are just extending, right, or changing their status? So, yeah, I don't know. There's still a little bit of confusion there. Also, considering the fact that PGWP is included under IMP, right? Unless they're including IMP as a change of status because they're changing from student to worker. But again, if I flip back to this and I click on number 4 under IMP, the IMP includes PGWPs, right? So I don't know. I guess there's a little bit of uncertainty or confusion there. And we'll have to kind of see. International student cap, okay. PGWP reform, IRCC tightened eligibility, okay. Temporary foreign worker program, 10% cap on employers hiring temporary workers under the low wage stream and an increase to the starting for the high wage stream. Limiting work permits for spouses of IRCC is tightening work permit eligibility for spouses of international students. Yeah, so I don't know. It still begs the question, unless I'm misreading this, Cecile, or I'm kind of like overthinking it or underthinking it. Let me know like kind of what your thoughts are there. But it still confuses me a little bit why that drop is so huge, especially with those other workers excluded. Anyways, let's touch on PR because I do want to cover these before we have to get back to our respective days, of course. And so what we're looking at here is the huge difference in the numbers of PR, right? As I said, on the left we have 2024, on the right we have 2025. Now, weirdly, they kind of categorized a little bit different here, right? So you can see last year they had federal high skilled, which is basically express entry, and then economic public policies, which was, I guess, TR to PR, right? Which there was none of, so it doesn't really matter for the purposes of conversation. Now, this year, they've broken it up to federal economic priorities and in Canada focus. So what this includes is, I think, basically saying industry-specific draws and CEC, right? Again, doesn't really matter. The most important part here that I'm looking at is this number, this whole number. So the 41 plus the 82 is roughly about, 124,000, right? So 124,000 combined here from industry-specific draws, express entry, CEC, etc., which is actually an increase from last year, right? So you can see here 110,000. So I see this as a good thing. What it seems like we're leaning towards is they are going to heavily focus the PR numbers on economic immigrants, which I think is a good decision. So let's see how this fits into everything else. Now then we go to the next one, which is federal business, which has to do with the startup visa and self-employed persons program. And what they've done here is they've cut it from 5,000 in 2024. Now let me just make sure it's the same thing. Yeah, startup visa and self-employed. So from 5,000 to 2,000. Now, this part just baffles me, and it goes back to our earlier conversation about ICT. I get it that you're trying to curb immigration. Why are you trying to turn entrepreneurs away from Canada at a time where our economy is doing very bad? We need more job creation. We need to improve our output, and we need more jobs. So why, if we're still going to bring in so many people, why would we not prioritize entrepreneurs? This makes no sense to me, cutting from 5,000 to 2,000. Now, maybe part of it is because there's so much backlogged in SUV and et cetera, et cetera. Still, doesn't make any sense to me. I think they need to improve their entrepreneurial PR pathways and actually prioritize entrepreneurs above anybody else, maybe, in my opinion. Cecile says, might not be as many extensions by 2026 versus 25 for people already in Canada. But I thought, Cecile, they're excluding extensions from those numbers. Or for example, if you're currently on an SP, you might be eligible for a PGWP, but then you can't get any other status. Yeah, but my brain is still trying to figure it out. Mine too, right? Because what you just showed me was that they're excluding those people who are changing their status from those numbers. So something still doesn't add up, in my opinion. Ahmed says, I love the in-Canada focus on this announcement. It's huge news for people in Canada trying to transition from TR to PR. I definitely agree with you there, Ahmed. I think it's a good decision. I'm curious why they kind of broke it out this way. They could have just, I guess, said, hey, CEC within Canada. But anyways, I think it's the right move. There's so many temporary residents in Canada, there has to be some priority given to them, right? Now, my big concern is, even if you combine these numbers, right? Because even the people who get invited through this, these federal economic priorities are probably going to be mostly people in Canada, because when you're in Canada, on average, you have a higher score, right? So for example, this first section here, it includes, language ability, blah, blah, blah. It's basically saying express entry and the industry-specific draws and the PNPs, right? I think. Oh, no, PNPs are separate. It's basically saying express entry and industry-specific draws. And so the people who have the higher scores there tend to be people who are already inside Canada because they have higher scores. They tend to have gotten more points from their Canadian education, Canadian work experience, et cetera, et cetera. Excuse me. Now, that, again, is a good thing. But here's my concern. We know there's over 2.5 million temporary residents in Canada right now. 2.5 million, right? Next year, there's only, where's the total here? For economic, 232,000 slots. What are all those people going to do, right? Now, again, one of the reports I linked to yesterday referred to, I think, Q2 or Q3 of this year, said that there's 2.8 million temporary residents in Canada, and they're fighting for 232,000 economic immigration slots, right? So let's say 232,000 divided by 2.8 million is 8.2%, right? Now, not counting the other programs that we're going to get to in just a second. So we have all these students and workers in Canada, more than 2.5 million apparently. We only have room for 8.2% of them to get economic PR next year. If that isn't probably going to be a cause for disaster, I don't know what is. But anyways, let's keep moving along here. So 2,000, I think this is bad. Federal economic pilots, so caregivers, agri-food, et cetera, 10,900. That seems to be about similar to last year. Probably makes sense. I don't know. Nothing really jumps out at me there. Atlantic Immigration Program is taking a hit. So last year they were given 6,500. This year they're given 5,000. And then you can see here, IRCC was actually planning on increasing this number year over year. Now they get cut and they're holding it flat. So the AIP program, not looking great in terms of numbers. PNPs got absolutely destroyed, right? So last year, the budget or the target was 110,000. This year, 55,000, and they're holding it flat, right? As of last year, they were at 110,000 and going to increase it year over year. Now they're cutting it at 55. Why? I don't know. It seems to me like PNPs would maybe be a good avenue to keep open, but maybe they're not being run well. I don't know. That's a huge cut. They're cutting PNPs in half. This is a bit of a surprising cut to me. I don't know why. If anybody has any opinions or knowledge, then please do let me know. But this is definitely one of the more surprising numbers to me. I would say under economic, probably the two most surprising numbers to me are number one, the business class. I don't know why it's being cut by so much. And PNPs are really taking a beating. So if you're an aspiring immigrant, or if you're a Canadian immigration consultant, lawyer who does a lot of work in PNPs, please keep these numbers in mind. Now let's keep moving on. We're going to move down to the next class here, which is family class. Last year was given 114,000 slots. This year cut down to 94.5. So definitely taking a bit of a cut. And we can see broken down here, spouses, partner, and children from 82 down to 70,000. Parents and grandparents from 32,000 to 24.5. I think this part is probably good in a time where we do need to reduce numbers. Parents and grandparents probably shouldn't be the priority right now, right? Now, would it be great for people to be able to bring their parents and grandparents? Absolutely. But should we as a country be prioritizing giving people's parents and grandparents PR, especially given how strained our healthcare, systems are already? Probably not. So I think this stuff makes sense. I think it makes sense that, where's the overall PR number here? Economic 281, now economics 232, still taking a pretty big hit. I would say that if I had my pick, economic would be taking the smallest hit, which is, I think, percentage-wise how they've done it. Next up, refugees and protected persons. So we can see here last year 76,000, this year 58,000. So definitely taking a hit. Protected persons in Canada and dependents abroad was 27,000 down to 20. Resettled refugees from 21 down to 15. Resettled refugees, so first is government assisted, second is privately sponsored, from 27 down to privately sponsored is right here, 27 down to 23,000, and then the blended visa from 250 to 100. Overall from 76 down to 58. Again, probably something that needs to happen, right? Given the situation of our country and the economy and the budget and a whole whack of other factors, I think it makes sense to be reducing these numbers. H&C from 13,750 down to 10. This is crazy because both of these are actually going to have huge effects because these two pathways have become extremely popular because of everything we just talked about. It has gotten so much harder to get, like, already it's become so much harder to get permanent residence through the economic pathways. So what are people doing? They're turning, whether legitimate or not, to refugee claims and H&C applications. Again, whether they're eligible or should be using them or not. These volumes have skyrocketed. Now they're being capped much more heavily, right? From 76,000 to 58 for refugee, from 13,700 to 10,000 for H&C. What I think might happen then is, well, what's probably already happened is massive backlogs, right? The number of H&C applications has skyrocketed. Can I pull that data? Oops. Let me go. H&C applications submitted in Canada. Let's see if we can pull up some data. I don't know if we can. How many H&C applications submitted in Canada? I don't really know. Can ChatGPT help us out here? How many H&C applications were submitted in Canada in 2023 and or 2022? Okay, yeah, it's just telling me to look it up, which I don't really want to do right now. But anyways, I forget what the numbers are off the top of my head. My biggest fear here is these two, if not already, are going to be severely backlogged. I can only imagine how processing times will be affected and all that kind of stuff. So just keep in mind that if you're going down that pathway or thinking about going down that pathway, I can only imagine, how those may be affected. So that's the big stuff, right? Now, the last thing I want to highlight here before we maybe drop off is that, yes, they're doing big reductions in 2025. These numbers are going to continue to be reduced over the next 3 years. Because the last many years, we're used to these level plans covering 3 years with numbers going up every year. This time, for the first time in a long time, all these numbers are being further reduced year over year, right? So 395,000 in 2025, further reduced to 380,000 in 2026, further reduced to 365,000 in 2027. So it's only going to get tougher. Right, if you can look at the economic numbers from 232 to 229 to 225, family class from 94 to 88 to 81, refugee and protected persons from 58 to 55 to 54, H&C from 10 down to 6,900 down to 4,300 in 2027. So anyways, crazy times. The crazy times continue. What I will probably do at some point today is do a deeper dive and deeper review of the backgrounder, just to see if there's any important information here that can kind of help guide some of my thoughts, some of my opinions. But overall, I'm pretty surprised. We knew stuff was coming, but this is a lot, right? Really cutting and further reducing these numbers over the next few years temporarily and also permanently, for temporary residents and for permanent residents. So the last X factor that I'll leave you with is the election, right? There is an election coming at the latest, October, November of next year. So all of this can be put into place, all of this can go underway, and then what happens if the Conservatives win, right? Are there going to be further adjustments, further changes? Probably. I don't know what, and I don't know by how much. But we have to imagine that this is a huge change, and probably if and hopefully when, between you and I, the Conservatives win, not to make this too political, if and when the Conservatives win, what, if anything, do they do to change all of this that we're all, digging into? So anyways, food for thought. Let me know what you think. If you have any thoughts, questions, opinions, by all means, if you're watching on LinkedIn, please feel free to leave a comment. I'm going to end this live session in a minute here, But if you watch this after the fact and you want to leave a question or a comment, please feel free, and I'll make sure to keep my eye on it throughout the day. If you're watching the recording of this on YouTube, today is October 24th, the very day that all of this dropped. And if you're watching after the fact, please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you can like, subscribe, that also really helps us as well. If you enjoy the content and if you want to continue checking out the Visto Show. Every 2 weeks, every second Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern, I go live just like this on LinkedIn. So if you do want to tune in live and take part in the conversation, then make sure you're following me on LinkedIn. A link to my profile will be in the description below as well. So thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. Really appreciate it. What a time to be alive in the world of Canadian immigration. I'm sure it seems like things are even just warming up as well. So we will definitely have more to discuss in the next episode. Thanks, everybody, again. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.